See right up your nose.
Okay, good Vach. Good Vach. This Shabbos, I happened to meet some descendants of a Hasidic mentor. When I was studying yeshiva in Morristown, of Emil Tzibel, which will always talk about Rav Moshe Alperovitch. Moshe Alperovitch lived in Israel in the early days of the state, and he's a remarkable individual. And just a few fascinating stories about him that just highlight who he was. He was given a position as a manager in I think it was in a shipping warehouse in Israel, but he didn't want to be the manager because he felt it was dishonest. Because he wanted to think about the chapters of Tanya, the chapter and the pages of the Talmud that he knew by heart, and thinking about them and focusing on them at that time might take him away from his job. I didn't want to not think about the chapters of Tanya, because what else is going to do without the Tanya? So he asked to change his position from being a manager to being a porter. It means he had to carry these heavy, it was construction, he was carrying these heavy slabs of concrete, and he chose that position in order to be able to continuously say words of time. Rameil Chal V'Shalom would always repeat at the Farbrengens how Rav Moshe, he would come to a Farbrengen and he would wish, he would say L'chaim, he would say, I wish that I think Tanya for the right reasons. What he meant was that he would, the area that he was carrying these slabs of concrete was an area where there were a lot of anti-Semites, Arabs, and so he would wish, they ask Hashem, he would say L'chaim, and give a toast, ask Hashem that he shouldn't think Tanya because he wants to protect himself from the Arabs, but he should think Tanya for the sake of Hashem. That's what bothered him. That's what he felt like he wasn't doing this so sincerely. So when Ramosha, this story I just heard today, new story, never heard before. Ramosha was a child. He at 11 years old. That day he was brought into the morgue. His mother had just received a visa to leave Soviet Russia. So it was a bit of a very peculiar and perplexing situation. On the one hand, they have a visa to leave Russia. On the other hand, their child is 11 years old and he's in a morgue. What are they going to do? So she comes home from Ovir. That was the name of the office in Russia that gave visas to leave Russia. She comes home from Ovir and she sees her husband is by a window and he's looking out the window and with his hand on his forehead and he's like crouched over and he's clearly meditating. She screams at her husband, "You're meditating? You're meditating on Hasidic philosophy now? Don't you know that our son is in dire straits?" So he said, "Please, I'm trying to communicate with the Rebbe Rashab." The Rebbe Rashab at that time was living in Rostov. They were in Moscow, but he was closing his eyes and communicating with the Rebbe Rashab. That's what he's told to his wife. And his grandson, or great grandson, told me the story today. He said he managed to send a fax to the Rebbe Rashab in time when there were no fax machines yet. Apparently, the Rebbe Rashab got his message because miraculously their son emerged from the morgue, hale and hearty, within that week, and because of that, he recovered. They were able to leave with their visa out of Russia and arrive in Eretz Yisrael. So this chassid, Rav Moshe Alperovitch, he was very careful in every thought, every word, and every action that he did. So much so that on his grave it says, Zahir Machshava Dibra Maisa. He was careful with every thought, word, and action. And in other words, he was what the Tanya refers to as a Beinoni. Beinoni is someone who never makes a mistake, that every word, every thought, every action is considered. And Ramelech said that the Rebbe edited his tombstone, and so Ramelech viewed this as the Rebbe affirming that he was indeed in the status of a Beinoni. I do know that the Rebbe edited, I think, all tombstones, so I'm not sure if there's something unique about the way the Rebbe edited this tombstone or not, but this was something that people knew about him, that he was very careful with every word, thought, and action. This is something which is relevant to the Torah portion that we just read today. We read about the 10 Commandments. And among the 10 Commandments, there is the mitzvah of honoring your father and mother. And every mitzvah that Hashem commands us to do is not just a mitzvah that we're supposed to do, but every mitzvah has tremendous merit and blessing. So the Torah says about honoring your father and mother that it is a blessing to have a long life. Some of the commentaries say that it takes so much time to honor your parents, and therefore the Torah tells you, don't worry, this will give you a long life. So by being more careful in the things Hashem tells us to do, it's not just something that we're required and need to do vis-a-vis our obligations to Hashem, but it's something that blesses us in a very down-to-earth way, in a very physical way. So I want to share with you a story about honoring your parents and how it actually brings to a long life. There was a gentleman named Menachem ben Mashiach. His last name is ben Mashiach. I read the story in the My Encounter, Volume 2. He was born in Hamadan, and his grandfather, Menachem Shmuel Halevi, was a rabbi there in the 1920s who moved to Jerusalem. And actually, I think he was also born in Jerusalem. I think he was born in Jerusalem as well. But his grandfather was a rabbi in Hamadan, and he made a school in the Bukharian section of Jerusalem where very prominent Torah scholars graduated the school and became people of great repute. Among them was, for example, the two chief rabbis of Israel, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef and Mordechai Eliyahu. They're all students in his yeshiva. So this Menachem ben Mashiach, he moved back to New York. He got into the jewelry industry. He was focusing mainly on pearls. And in 1973, he was doing business with a certain Mayor Plotkin from Montreal, Canada. And he mentioned to Mayor Plotkin that he needs to travel to the Far East for his business. And in those days, in 1973, it wasn't, you couldn't take a direct flight. And he said, on the way there, I'm going to have to go from New York, from there to LA, from LA to Hawaii, from Hawaii to Okinawa, and from Okinawa to Tokyo. That's on the way there. But on the way back, I'm going to have to take a flight from Hong Kong to Mumbai, and from Mumbai to Tehran, and from Tehran to Tel Aviv, and from Tel Aviv to New York, because I need to visit his mother. That time was sick in Jerusalem. And therefore, he's going to have to go on the way back on this roundabout way from Hong Kong to Mumbai to Tehran to Tel Aviv. and then back to New York. And at the time, there were a series of hijackings. Five flights were hijacked by terrorists, and as soon as the flights were hijacked, the hijackers separated the Jewish Israeli um, uh, people from the rest of the um, passengers, separated the Israelis from the rest of the passengers, and it was very dangerous at that time to travel. So when Mayor Plotkin heard that he's traveling to the Far East, he said to him, I'm going to ask the Rebbe for a bracha for you. So this guy, Menachem ben Mashiach, is like, listen, I never met the Rebbe. I never spoke to the Rebbe. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think there's any reason for you to seek the Rebbe's advice or blessing because I don't really have any connection with him. The mayor was undeterred, and he said, listen, you're going to the Far East, it's dangerous. You need a blessing from a tzaddik. I'm going to ask the Rebbe for a blessing for your journey. So he calls up the Rebbe's office, and the Rebbe said that he should make sure to travel back in the same route that he travels to. In other words, he's traveling to the Far East, the same route he's traveling, which is New York, LA, Hawaii, Okinawa, Tokyo. He should go back to Tokyo, Okinawa, Hawaii, LA, New York. That's what he should do. But he told Mayor, I can't. I need. My mother is not well. I need a visit. I need a visitor in Jerusalem. So please tell the Rebbe I can't. The Rebbe said, if you want to travel back the same way, make sure to check all your mezuzahs before you leave. Okay. So he told his wife that he wanted her to check the mezuzahs, and he figured his wife will bring. The Rebbe's advice really surprised him because he just bought a new home, a big, beautiful new home, and he got 40 mezuzahs for his home, 40 new mezuzahs. So why would he have to check them as brand new mezuzahs? But the Rebbe's advice, he told his wife to do it, but it wasn't enough time to check his mezuzahs before his flight. So he told his wife, "You check them, and by the time I get back, the mezuzah will be checked." But he still was nervous about the Rebbe's advice. So he just took off one mezuzah from his bedroom door, and he looked at the mezuzah himself. And in the mezuzah, there is a paragraph that we read today in the Torah, the paragraph of the Shema. We read the words, "Vishinantam levanecha," should teach the Torah to your children. V'dibarta bam, you should speak about the Torah. V'shivtecha b'veisecha, when you're sitting at home. V'lechtecha v'derech, when you go on the road. V'shachbacha, when you lie down. V'kumecha, when you rise. So the words uv'lechtecha v'derech, when you go on the road, the dalet of the word v'derech, the dalet of the word on the road, was missing. The whole letter was missing. So he decided to take a mezuzah in the basement and put it on his bedroom door instead. But he was completely distraught. He called the sofer. The sofer was also very distraught. I mean, he had made all these mezuzahs. He couldn't believe that this was happening, but it was. And so he went to check the mezuzahs. Now realizing that the Rebbe's words are very prescient, he set off on his journey. He was for 3 weeks on this business trip, and at the end of the 3 weeks, he went back to travel back to New York again, wanting to stop off first in Jerusalem. So he took an Air France flight, and he was supposed to land in Israel, but the problem was that the flight was running out of gas. They had to stop somewhere to refuel. Now, at that time, Tehran had excellent relationship with the Shah, was very good to the Jews, and there was no issue. But the surrounding countries around Israel were all very hostile, all enemies. And he was traveling with an Israeli passport as an Israeli citizen, and it was very, very dangerous because the flight had to stop off in somewhere to refuel. Where are they going to stop? So the pilot announced, we're going to stop in Kuwait. So he immediately tells the stewardess, I can't stop in Kuwait because I'm an Israeli citizen. This is dangerous. I can't stop in Kuwait. So the pilot realizes the gravity of the situation, and the pilot says, "Okay, we figured it out. We're gonna stop off in Iraq, which is worse." They but the pilot assures them, "Listen, the plane they were traveling in had 2 floors. You're going to be up in the second deck with us, with the crew. No, we're just going to stop for 1 hour, and we're going to go refuel, go straight to Israel. Don't worry." The flight lands. Everyone is called to disembark from the plane, except for him. He goes up to the second floor with the crew. The crew didn't have to disembark, but a guard from the Iraqi security comes on the plane, and he stayed on the plane, and he looked at him. He looked at him, and he had in front of him a kosher meal. It said kosher on the meal, and he was frightened because there's a clear identification of his Jewishness by his meal. So he was afraid to eat. He was afraid to put on tefillin because he doesn't want to announce that he's Jewish. But on the other hand, what should he do? And it didn't take 1 hour. He's on the plane for 11 hours straight. And the whole time, this Iraqi guard is looking at him. And he's sitting there in fear for 11 hours. Finally, Baruch Hashem, the Iraqi guard leaves. The rest of the passengers go back on the plane, and they take off, and they come to Israel. When they come to Israel, all of the news is there. The news wants to find out what happened, and the news wants to interview him. But Baruch Hashem, he didn't want to deal with the news after going through such a harrowing experience, and he managed to go through a different route, not having talked to all the newspapers and radio and television, etc. He makes it to see his mother, and eventually he travels to New York. When he comes to New York, he contacts his friend Rabbi Shalom Dober Hecht, and he tells Rabbi Hecht that he wants to see the Rebbe. Rabbi Hecht arranges an audience for him, and when he came to visit the Rebbe's office for a private audience, he was so overcome with emotion, and he tells the Rebbe, he says to the Rebbe, "Rebbe, do you know what happened to me? Do you know what happened?" And the Rebbe, with a beaming smile, the Rebbe said, I know. You were in danger. But what saved you was a mitzvah of honoring your father and mother. Because you wanted to see your sick mother, that's what protected you. That merit of that mitzvah protected you. So this encounter with the Rebbe began a beautiful relationship between him and the Rebbe. And he said he saw the Rebbe many, many times since then. But every time he thinks about Rebbe Menachem, thinks about that first time he saw the Rebbe, he thinks about the way the Rebbe was smiling at him, the Rebbe looking at him, and listening to him, is he breaks down in tears. Just the holiness of that experience. So the Zohar Machshava Din U'Maaseh, being careful every word and thought and action, especially the mitzvah of honoring our father and mother, say something which brings merit not just in the world to come, but merit in this world. But this is not only a mitzvah of honoring our parents, but this mitzvah also instructs parents to act in a way that is honorable. On that note, I want to share with you a story about Henny Carneal. I shared a story about her last week, and I want to share with you a few more stories about this remarkable woman. As I mentioned last Thursday, she was a very gifted teacher, and she and her husband were living in a village called Kfar Maimon, and they're very devout, devoted Chabad Hasidim. And their oldest son didn't particularly like the fact that he was different than his peers, and being in this environment which wasn't up to par with what he felt would be a Hasidic environment. And but his parents were on a mission there, so he wrote himself, a little boy wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said to him that your task is to spread the Torah to your peers and the school that you're in. And in regards to the subjects that you're not going to because you're there, you should ask your parents to teach you Torah after school is over so that you could learn and make up for the subjects that you're missing. The boy took to this instruction, the Rebbe, the fish to water. And not only did he ask his parents to teach him Torah, he invited all of his friends to come to his house. So what ended up happening was that his parents had lessons for all these children, one lesson for boys, one lesson for girls. Um, for the time we're in Kfar Maimon. But eventually, because of their children's education, Rebbe instructed the parents they should move from Kfar Maimon to Kfar Chabad. But while they were in Kfar Maimon, they were renting a home, and the home, their family was growing, and it was getting too difficult to live in these cramped quarters. And they asked the Rebbe if they should build an extension to their home, because I'm not sure if it was an apartment or a house, but they wanted to build an extension. On the other hand, they're renting. If you're renting, it's a waste of money because you can't take it with you if you move. But they asked the Rebbe said you should build an extension with joy and gladness of heart. They built an extension, and then eventually they moved out. They wanted to move to Kfar Chabad, and as Rebbe instructed them that this would be good for them. But they didn't have the money to buy an apartment in Kfar Chabad. There was a new housing project beginning there, and they were able to buy, but they didn't have the money to buy. It was 25,000 lira. That was the currency in Israel at the time for a down payment. They didn't have it 25,000. So Henny told her husband, Rabbi Karniel, you should ask the Rebbe for a bracha. So we should be able to get the down payment. And her husband said, no. If the Rebbe told us to move there, and the Rebbe's instruction are in themselves a blessing, and therefore we don't have to ask for another blessing. He had such faith, and she accepted it. And got to mention that the Rebbe said they should move to Kfar Chabad if his wife accepts this move, and she did. She knew that if the Rebbe thought this was a good idea, this was the best idea. But again, they're missing 25,000 lira for the down payment. At that time, while they needed this 25,000, they were suddenly contacted by this yeshiva that wanted to take over their home. And the yeshiva said, we like the extension that you made. We want to pay you 25,000 for the investment you did in this property so that we could take over your lease. And so that's what happened. They took over their apartment. They paid them 25,000 lira, and they were able to go the exact amount they needed to get into this new apartment in Kfar Chabad. So they came to Kfar Chabad. The boys acclimated very well, the girls not so much. And so at that time, her husband told Tanya, you never saw the Rebbe yet. It'd be a very good thing, we're chassidim to go see the Rebbe. They didn't have money to go to the Rebbe, but it was very expensive in those days, especially for them. But as Rebbe Marash says, there's an obstacle. There are those who say when there's an obstacle, if you can't go under, go over. But the Rebbe Marash said, I say go straight over. And they found a travel agent who knew about the Rebbe and was willing to take installments for the ticket. And so they got a ticket, and they come to the Rebbe. After being in New York for 3 weeks, they had an audience at the Rebbe, and the Rebbe asked them how it's going, and she says to the Rebbe, everyone's happy, especially the boys. The Rebbe said you have to make sure that the girls are happy as well. And the Rebbe said, are the girls lighting Shabbos candles? And she says, yes. And the Rebbe asked again, are all the girls lighting Shabbos candles? She doesn't understand why the Rebbe is asking a second time. She already said yes. He says yes. Then the Rebbe asked a third time, are all the girls lighting Shabbos candles? She says yes a third time. So the Rebbe took out 5 single dollar bills, and he laid them out like a fan. And he said that she had 5 girls. And the Rebbe said to give this to your girls, they should give to charity before lighting Shabbos candles. And the Rebbe put out $2 for their 2 sons. The Rebbe said we don't want to differentiate between the boys and the girls, therefore give the boys also $2 so they should give to charity as well. The girls should give to charity before lighting Shabbos candles. and she leaves the Rebbe's room, and she couldn't figure out why the Rebbe asked her 3 times in a row to all your girls light Shabbos candles. And she realized she had a 2-year-old. And the Rebbe had instructed that every girl from the age of 3 years old and on should light Shabbos candles. But the Rebbe was very careful to mention, you don't have to wait till you're 3 years old. Rivka, our matriarch, lit Shabbos candles from the age of 3, and therefore 3 is the age. But if a child already knows blessings and is able to say the blessings, they should light Shabbos candles even before the age of 3. And so her daughter was then 2 years old. She already knew how to say various blessings. There was no reason why not to include her and to light Shabbos candles with her as well. And so she wrote to the Rebbe, I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, and now I know what you were asking about. I'm going to make sure from now on that my 2-year-old also lights the Shabbos candles. Bottom line is that every good thought, every word, every action has an impact, makes a change in the world. And as we just read today in the Torah, Nachmu Nachmu Amishim gives us a promise of comfort, a double promise of comfort. And the Rebbe once explained the meaning of the double expression of comfort is because everything a Jew does has 2 dimensions. It's not just that the mitzvah is physical and has a spiritual component, but every part of doing a mitzvah is both physical and spiritual. Like Shabbos candles, it's not just a physical act. In those Shabbos candles themselves, there is a light of Hashem. And the spiritual light of Hashem is not in one place and the candles are somewhere else, but everything the Jew does is both physical and spiritual. And therefore, everything we do has to be with our whole heart and soul, not just with our body, because the mitzvahs that Hashem asks us to do are both physical and spiritual, and they impact the world. And Torah says in merit of the double mitzvahs, we will have a double comfort. The coming Mashiach comes, we won't just see the divine light of Hashem in a way that's abstract from the physical, but we will have the 3rd temple in Jerusalem. The 3rd temple is at once both physical and spiritual. And that will reveal in the world also the godliness and the holiness in the physical world. And in ourselves also, in every person will be revealed how a Jew is actually at once both physical and spiritual. So on the merit of every mitzvah we do, that these mitzvahs themselves have this power. They're physical and spiritual at once, and therefore they're rebuilding the Beis Hamikdash, the 3rd temple in Jerusalem, which is also both physical and spiritual. Main thing is we should have the emissary, the true the true comfort, the coming Mashiach. And just one advertisement before I let you guys go. The Rebbe said that from tomorrow night and on, the night starts to get longer. The Gemara says that anyone who will start adding in Torah study from tomorrow night and on, Hashem will add life to their life. That's an effect in their physical body. The study of Torah has an effect in their physical lives. And the Rebbe said it's not metaphorical. Studying Torah at night, from tomorrow night and on, is something, it says clearly in the Gemara, makes you live longer. So we should make good decisions to add more in our Torah study from tomorrow night and on. And we should celebrate the 15th of Av, Mashiach Tzidkenu. The Gemara says it's the greatest holiday, greater than Shabbos, greater than Yontiv, greater than Simchas Torah. And as the Rebbe said, we should celebrate the 15th of Av even with a greater joy than Simchas Torah, because the 15th of Av is a time when there is the new moon, and the new moon always represents the new light of the Jewish people. But in every other month, the new moon is not as great as this month, because the moon's waning represents the lessening of the light of the Jewish people, and the moon growing represents the full light of the Jewish people. So unlike Passover, which is on the 15th of the month, and unlike Sukkot, which is on the 15th of the month, their elevation, their fullness is after a smaller descent. But the month of Av, which has a descent of the 9th of Av, the greatest descent, the 15th of Av represents the light of Mashiach, the greatest light that there is. And that's why it's a greater simcha than Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. And we should see Taka, the emissary, the revelation of the oneness of Hashem in the physical world, the coming of Mashiach. And we should celebrate tonight in Shalayim, and automatically we'll see the real majesty of what the 15th of Av is about. Good Vachman, Chayil, Beryl, Blake, Chaysara, Michal David, Menachem, and the Rebels Chavrusa, which I think that's Reb David Cohen. And Yehudi Aron, have a good Vach, a freilich Vach.